She was called to the boardroom to be fired, but the CEO just wanted to ask her to dinner. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The wine-colored lipstick felt heavier than usual as Rain Coleman pressed her lips together, staring at the Slack notification that had just shattered her Friday afternoon. Directorate, 5:15 p.m. No explanation, no context. Just those 3 words that made her stomach drop like a stone into dark water. She sat frozen at her desk in the open-plan office, the familiar hum of keyboards and muted conversations suddenly feeling distant and surreal. Her fingers hovered over her phone, trembling slightly as she checked the time. 4:47 p.m., 28 minutes. 28 minutes before her world potentially collapsed. Rain had always prided herself on being prepared for everything. Her Google Calendar was color-coded, her desk organized with military precision, and her backup plans had backup plans. But this felt like standing at the edge of a cliff she hadn't seen coming. The layoffs had been whispered about for weeks. Hushed conversations by the coffee machine, nervous glances exchanged in elevators, and the way senior management had started closing their office doors more often. Everyone knew it was coming. The question wasn't if, but who. She glanced around the office, noticing how unusually quiet it was for a Friday afternoon. Too quiet. Had others already been called? Her chest tightened as she mentally calculated her finances. Rent due in 5 days, student loan payment next week, her mother's medication costs that insurance didn't fully cover. Breathe, Rain. Just breathe. She pulled up her phone and opened Instagram, scrolling past the usual motivational quotes from Black creators she followed. One post caught her eye. Sometimes the universe moves you when you're too scared to move yourself. She almost laughed at the irony. The universe was about to move her, all right, straight to the unemployment line. Her reflection stared back at her from the black screen of her monitor. 28 years old, 2 years of faithful service, always early, never complained. She'd fixed other people's mistakes without asking for credit, stayed late to finish projects that weren't even hers, and maintained that careful balance of being competent without being threatening. But apparently none of that mattered when the budget needed cutting. The elevator ding made her jump. She watched as 3 colleagues emerged, their faces pale and carrying small cardboard boxes. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Not good. Not good at all. Rain? She turned to see Marcus from IT standing by her cubicle, his expression sympathetic. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just tired, she managed, forcing what she hoped was a convincing smile. Long week. He nodded, but his eyes held that look, the same one she'd been getting from people lately. Pity mixed with relief that it wasn't them. Well, hang in there. Monday's almost here. If I still have a job on Monday. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Kira. Wine night tonight, you sounded stressed earlier. Rain typed back, might need something stronger than wine, then deleted it. No point in worrying anyone until she knew for sure. The office slowly emptied as 5 p.m. approached. Rain remained glued to her chair, watching the clock tick with the precision of a metronome counting down to disaster. She'd changed her outfit 3 times that morning, settling on navy slacks, a crisp white button-down and her lucky earrings, as if looking professional could somehow shield her from corporate decisions made in boardrooms she'd never see. At 5:10, she stood on shaking legs and walked toward the executive floor. The elevator ride felt eternal, each floor ding like a countdown to Judgment Day. The hallway stretched before her like a runway, all polished floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that made her feel exposed and small. She paused outside the directorate door, her hand raised to knock. Through the frosted glass she could see a silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, probably the HR director, ready to deliver the news with practiced efficiency and fake sympathy. Just get it over with. She knocked twice, her wine-colored lips forming a silent prayer. Come in. But when she opened the door, it wasn't HR sitting behind the massive oak desk. It was Noah Beckett himself, the CEO, the man whose emails she'd been forwarding and whose coffee preferences she'd memorized but had never spoken to directly. And he was smiling. Why was he smiling? She must have heard wrong. Rain stood frozen in the doorway, her brain struggling to process the words that had just left Noah Beckett's mouth, the same mouth that had smiled at her moments before, a smile that now seemed impossibly surreal. I'm sorry. What did you say? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own heartbeat. Noah leaned back in his leather chair, those steel blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "I asked if you'd like to have dinner with me. Tomorrow night." The office suddenly felt too small, too warm. Rain's carefully organized world tilted sideways as she tried to make sense of this moment. She'd walked in here expecting pink slips and cardboard boxes. Instead, she was standing in front of the most powerful man in the building, who was asking her on a date. "I don't understand," she managed, her fingers unconsciously smoothing down her button-down shirt. The notification said, "Directorate meeting." I thought I was being laid off. Something shifted in Noah's expression, a flicker of something almost vulnerable. "You thought I called you here to fire you? Everyone's been getting called in, the layoffs." She gestured vaguely toward the door where colleagues had walked out with their belongings just hours before. "Rain." The way he said her name made her breath catch, not Ms. Coleman or "Hey you" like she was used to. Just her name spoken with a careful precision that suggested he'd thought about saying it before. "You're not getting laid off. In fact, you're one of the reasons this company runs as smoothly as it does." Heat crept up her neck. She'd never heard feedback like this before. Not from anyone, let alone from Noah Beckett. "I just do my job." "You do everyone's job," he said, standing up. The movement made her acutely aware of how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the room. "Do you know how many reports I get that have your corrections on them? How many mistakes you catch that never make it to my desk?" She didn't know what to say to that. Pride and confusion warred in her chest. "I've been watching you work for months," Noah continued, moving around the desk to lean against it. The casual gesture somehow made him seem more human, less like the untouchable CEO she'd built up in her mind. "The way you handle chaos without losing your composure. The way you help other people succeed without asking for recognition. Mr. Beckett, I appreciate the feedback, but I don't understand why you're telling me this, or why you're asking me to dinner." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, her Virgo nature demanding clarity even as her nerves screamed at her to just agree and figure it out later. His jaw tightened slightly. "Because I'd like to get to know you outside of this context, away from org charts and quarterly reports." He paused, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Because I think you're remarkable, and I'd like to know if you think I'm worth knowing too." The honesty in his voice hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't some corporate power play or casual Friday afternoon whim. This was vulnerability, wrapped in expensive suits and delivered in a corner office that cost more than her annual salary. She started to speak, then stopped. Her mind raced through 1,000 reasons why this was a terrible idea. The office gossip, the power dynamic, the fact that she'd never dated anyone who could buy and sell her entire family's net worth without blinking. "I need time to think," she said finally. Noah nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course, but Rain..." He waited until she met his eyes. "Don't overthink it. Sometimes the simplest questions have the simplest answers." She turned to leave, her hand on the door handle, when his voice stopped her again. "For what it's worth, I was nervous too." The admission hung in the air between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. She looked back at him, really looked, and saw something she'd never noticed before. Behind the steel blue eyes and the perfect composure was a man who'd just taken the same risk she was being asked to take. "Good night, Mr. Beckett." "Noah," he corrected gently. "My name is Noah." She nodded once and walked out, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The hallway stretched before her, empty and quiet, but her mind was anything but silent. As she waited for the elevator, her phone buzzed with a text from Kira. "So? How bad was it?" Rain stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. How could she explain that she'd walked into her worst nightmare and somehow stumbled into her most confusing dream? "It wasn't what I expected," she typed back. The elevator doors opened, and as she stepped inside, one thought echoed through her mind with terrifying clarity. What if she actually wanted to say yes? The wineglass trembled in Rain's hand as she stared at her reflection in Kira's bathroom mirror. "Girl, you've been pacing for 30 minutes. Just tell me what happened," Kira called from the living room of her midtown apartment. The sounds of a Netflix show paused in the background. Rain took a sip of the cheap Moscato they'd been sharing and tried to organize her thoughts. "How do you explain that your biggest fear turned into your most confusing moment? That the CEO who signs your paychecks asked you out like you were equals?" "He asked me to dinner," she said finally, walking back into the living room where Kira sat cross-legged on her second-hand couch, surrounded by takeout containers from their favorite Thai place. Kira nearly choked on her spring roll. "Who asked you to dinner?" Marcus from IT. That guy's been staring at you for weeks. No. Rain sank into the armchair, pulling her knees up to her chest. Noah Beckett. The silence that followed was deafening. Kira's dark eyes widened, her mouth falling open in a way that would have been comical under different circumstances. The CEO Noah Beckett? The same Noah Beckett whose face is on the company website? The one who probably makes more in a day than we make in a year? That's the one. Holy shit. Kira set down her food, suddenly laser-focused. Okay, back up. Start from the beginning. Everything. So Rain told her. About the Slack notification, the walk to the executive floor, the way Noah had smiled when she expected termination papers, about how he'd watched her work, noticed her corrections, called her remarkable, about the nervousness in his voice that matched her own. When she finished, Kira was quiet for a long moment, absently braiding and unbraiding a section of her natural hair, a habit from childhood that surfaced when she was processing something big. So what did you tell him? That I needed time to think. And what are you thinking? Rain buried her face in her hands. That this is insane. That people like me don't date people like him. That everyone at work will think I'm some kind of gold digger, or that I slept my way into keeping my job. People like you? Kira's voice carried a warning edge. What's that supposed to mean? You know what I mean, Kira. Look at me. Rain gestured at her casual weekend outfit, worn jeans and an old college sweatshirt. I buy my groceries with coupons. I drive a car that's older than some of our interns. I live paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment with a leaky faucet I can't afford to fix. And he probably has houses I'll never see and cars that cost more than my student loans. We don't even exist in the same universe. Kira was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. Remember when we were sophomores and you had that massive crush on Derek Williams? What does Derek have to do with anything? You never asked him to the winter formal because you convinced yourself he was out of your league. Too popular, too everything. You know what happened? Rain sighed. He asked Tracy Martinez. Wrong. He spent the whole dance asking people if they'd seen you because he'd been working up the courage to ask you for weeks. You missed your chance because you decided for him that you weren't good enough. The words hit harder than Rain expected. She'd forgotten about Derek, about the what-ifs that had haunted her for months afterward. This is different, she protested weakly. Is it? Or are you doing the same thing you always do, making decisions based on fear instead of what you actually want? Before Rain could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but somehow she knew exactly who it was before she read it. I hope your evening is going well. I realize I never asked what kind of food you like. Noah. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. Kira peered over her shoulder and read the message, her eyebrows shooting up. He texted you. On a Saturday night. It's just a question about food. No, babe. It's not. Kira's voice was gentle but firm. It's him thinking about you. It's him being nervous enough to reach out with something small because he's probably overthinking this as much as you are. Rain stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. The responsible part of her brain, the part that had kept her safe and stable for 28 years, screamed warnings. But there was another part, quieter but growing stronger, that whispered something different. What if? What should I say? She asked, hating how young and uncertain her voice sounded. Kira smiled. Whatever feels honest. Rain took a breath and typed, Good evening. I love trying new places, but I have to admit, I'm more comfortable with small, quiet spots than fancy restaurants. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came quickly. Perfect, I know just the place. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, does tomorrow at 7 work for you? Rain's breath caught. This was it. The moment where she either stepped forward or stepped back. She looked at Kira, who was watching her with expectant eyes. What's the worst that could happen? Kira asked softly. Everything, Rain thought. But maybe, just maybe, the best thing could happen too. Yes, she typed. Tomorrow at 7. And with that simple word, everything changed. The small Ethiopian restaurant in Little 5 Points was nothing like what Rain had expected. She'd spent Sunday afternoon trying on every outfit she owned, finally settling on a simple black dress that Kira had insisted was classy but not trying too hard. She'd imagined Noah would choose some upscale steakhouse in Buckhead, the kind of place where the servers wore white gloves and the wine list cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Instead, he'd sent her the address to Addis Red Sea, a family-owned restaurant wedged between a vintage clothing store and a used bookshop. The kind of place she might actually choose herself. Now, sitting across from him at a small wooden table covered with traditional injera bread, Rain found herself relaxed for the first time in 48 hours. Noah had traded his usual corporate armor for dark jeans and a soft grey sweater that made his eyes look less like steel and more like summer storm clouds. "Have you ever had Ethiopian food before?" he asked, watching as she tentatively tried the dorowat with her fingers, following his lead. "Never," she admitted, surprised by how comfortable the admission felt. "But I like it. It's communal, sharing from the same plate. That's the point. Ethiopian culture believes that eating together creates bonds, trust." He paused, seeming to realize the weight of his words. "Sorry, I'm probably overthinking this. You studied Ethiopian culture." The question slipped out before she could stop it, genuine curiosity replacing her carefully maintained politeness. Noah's cheeks flushed slightly. "I may have done some research. I wanted to find somewhere that felt—" He searched for the words. "Not like a business dinner." Something warm unfurled in Rain's chest. He'd put thought into this, real thought, not just made a reservation at the most expensive place he could find. "Tell me something about yourself that's not in your employee file," he said, leaning forward slightly. "That's not how this works," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "You invited me. You go first." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair enough." He took a sip of his honey wine, considering. "I can't sleep without background noise. Usually old jazz records or BBC nature documentaries. Something about David Attenborough's voice." "David Attenborough?" Rain couldn't hide her amusement. "The CEO of TechFlow Atlanta falls asleep to nature documentaries. Don't mock the Penguin documentaries. They're very soothing." His smile was fully formed now, transforming his entire face. "Your turn." Rain twirled injera around her finger, thinking. "I have a podcast addiction. Self-help, true crime, interviews with black entrepreneurs. I listen while I organize my apartment, which I do every Sunday morning because if my space is chaotic, my brain is chaotic." "Virgo, how did you—" "Lucky guess. I'm a Scorpio, which apparently means I'm brooding and mysterious." He said it with such dry humor that Rain laughed despite herself. "Are you? Brooding and mysterious?" "According to my ex-girlfriend, yes. According to my sister, I'm just emotionally constipated." The casual mention of family, of an ex-girlfriend, made him seem suddenly startlingly human. Not the untouchable CEO from the 20th floor, but a man who got teased by his sister and had relationships that didn't work out. "What happened?" "With the ex-girlfriend?" The question escaped before she could censor herself. "Sorry, that's too personal." "No, it's fine." Noah's expression grew thoughtful. "Claire said I treated our relationship like a business acquisition, that I had strategies for everything except actually being present with her." He met Rain's eyes. She wasn't wrong. The honesty in his voice made Rain's chest tighten. She recognized something familiar in it, the weight of past mistakes, of patterns you couldn't seem to break. "I do that too," she said quietly. "Not the business thing, but I plan everything to death. Contingency plans for contingency plans. My last boyfriend said dating me felt like being managed. Was he right?" Rain considered the question seriously. "Probably. I was so afraid of getting hurt that I never let him close enough to hurt me, or to really love me." The words hung between them, more intimate than anything they'd shared so far. Noah reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. "What are you afraid of now?" he asked softly. "Everything," she thought. "Being a footnote in your life. Being the girl people whisper about. Being too much or not enough. Getting lost," she said instead, which was also true. "Becoming someone I'm not, because I think it's what you want." Noah was quiet for a long moment, his fingers finally brushing against hers. "What if I told you that who you are right now, the woman who corrects reports without asking for credit, who color codes her calendar, who was brave enough to say yes, even though it scared her, what if I told you that's exactly who I want to know?" The restaurant buzzed around them, couples sharing meals, friends laughing over coffee, but Rain felt like they were suspended in their own private bubble. She looked at Noah, really looked at him, and saw something that made her breath catch. He was nervous too. Despite the expensive education and the corner office, and the confidence that came with being in charge of hundreds of people, he was sitting across from her with the same flutter of uncertainty in his eyes that she felt in her stomach. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "When we go back to work?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'd like to find out." When he walked her to her car later that night, the autumn air crisp against their skin, he didn't try to kiss her. Instead, he stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and warm, and said, Thank you for taking the risk. Thank you for making it feel less like a risk. As she drove home, her phone buzzed with a text. Sweet dreams, Rain, and thank you for the best Sunday I've had in years. She smiled, typing back, thank you for the best surprise. But as she parked outside her apartment building, reality crept back in. Tomorrow they'd be back in their separate worlds. Him in his corner office, her in her cubicle. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to be the same Rain Coleman she'd always been, while everything inside her had shifted. Tomorrow, everything would be different, and she had no idea if that was wonderful or terrifying. The coffee tasted different. Rain stood at the office kitchenette, stirring sugar into her mug with unnecessary precision, acutely aware that everything felt shifted. The same fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The same morning chatter filled the air, but she felt like she was wearing someone else's skin. You're glowing, said Jasmine from accounting, appearing beside her with an empty mug. Good weekend. Just got some rest, Rain replied, hoping her voice sounded normal. Normal. As if she hadn't spent Sunday night replaying every moment of dinner, every word Noah had spoken, every almost touch of his fingers against hers. Lucky you. I spent mine at my sister's baby shower. 3 hours of guessing what's in dirty diapers. Jasmine made a face. Sometimes being single has its perks. Rain nodded absently, her eyes drifting toward the elevator bank. It was 8:47 a.m. Noah usually arrived around 9:15, always taking the executive elevator that opened directly onto the 20th floor. Would he acknowledge her? Would he pretend nothing had happened? Would he earth to Rain? Jasmine was waving a hand in front of her face. You sure you're okay? You seem distracted. Sorry, just thinking about the quarterly reports. It wasn't entirely a lie. She was thinking about reports, specifically the ones that would cross Noah's desk this week, the ones that might give him a reason to email her, to initiate contact that wouldn't seem suspicious to anyone watching. Back at her cubicle, Rain threw herself into work with unusual intensity. Email responses, file organization, calendar management, anything to keep her mind from wandering to grey sweaters and storm cloud eyes. She was deep in a spreadsheet when her computer chimed with a new message. From N. Beckett, techflow.com to R. Coleman, techflow.com. Subject, Quarterly Projection Review. Rain, could you please review the attached Q4 projections for accuracy? I noticed some discrepancies in the Southeast region data that need your expertise. Thank you, Noah P.S. I hope you slept well. Her heart did something acrobatic in her chest. On the surface, it was a perfectly normal work email, but that postscript, those 5 innocent words, made her feel like she was carrying a secret that glowed visibly under her skin. She read the email 3 times before opening the attachment, searching for hidden meanings in every professionally neutral sentence. Then she caught herself and laughed quietly. This was ridiculous. She was a grown woman, not a teenager analyzing text messages for hidden declarations of love. But when she opened the spreadsheet, she found something that made her breath catch. Embedded in the data, so subtle that only someone who knew spreadsheets intimately would notice, were numbers that spelled out a message when read vertically. 7 p.m. Tuesday. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed her response. From R. Coleman, techflow.com to N. Beckett, techflow. Subject, Quarterly Projection Review. Mr. Beckett, I've reviewed the projections and found the discrepancies you mentioned. I'll have the corrected version to you by end of day. Best regards, Rain P.S. Very well, thank you. She embedded her own hidden message in the revised spreadsheet. Yes. The rest of Monday passed in a strange suspension of normalcy. Rain attended meetings, answered phones, filed reports, all while carrying the electric knowledge of their secret correspondence. She caught glimpses of Noah throughout the day, a flash of his profile through a conference room window, his voice carrying down the hallway as he spoke with department heads. Each sighting sent a small shock through her system. At lunch, she sat with Jasmine and 2 other colleagues in the break room, half listening to their conversation about weekend plans and office gossip. Did you hear about the new intern in marketing? Asked David from HR, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Apparently, she's the daughter of one of the board members. Nepotism at its finest. That's nothing, Jasmine said, unwrapping her sandwich. I heard Beckett's been staying late a lot recently. Maybe the pressure's getting to him, or maybe he's finally dating someone. Rain's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Noah Beckett dating? David laughed. That robot? The man probably schedules bathroom breaks. He's not that bad, said Michelle from customer service. I had to deliver something to his office last month, and he was actually really polite, asked about my kids and everything. Still, Jasmine continued, can you imagine what kind of woman would appeal to him? Probably some Harvard MBA with her own trust fund. The words hit Rain like physical blows. She forced herself to keep eating, to nod at appropriate moments, to appear engaged in the conversation that was casually dissecting her. What? Her situation? Her non-relationship? The impossibility of someone like her being with someone like him. You're quiet today, Michelle observed, turning to Rain. What do you think? Can you picture our CEO in love? Yes, Rain thought, remembering the way Noah had looked at her across the injera bread, the vulnerability in his voice when he talked about his ex-girlfriend. I can picture exactly what he looks like when he's trying not to be afraid. I don't really think about my boss's personal life, she said instead, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Smart policy, David agreed. Keep work and personal separate. That's the key to surviving corporate life. When Rain returned to her desk, there was a small coffee cup waiting for her. The good coffee from the executive floor, not the bitter swill from the communal machine. A yellow sticky note was attached. Thought you might need the afternoon pick-me-up. A grateful colleague. She looked around, but there was no sign of who had delivered it. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Probably Noah had asked his assistant to write the note to maintain plausibility. But the coffee was exactly how she liked it. No cream, 1 sugar. He'd been paying attention. As the day wound down and the office slowly emptied, Rain found herself working later than usual, not ready to break the spell of proximity. Around 6:30, her phone buzzed with a text from the now familiar number. Long day, mine too, see you tomorrow. She typed back, Tuesday at 7 sounds perfect. I'm counting on it. Walking to her car in the parking garage, Rain felt the weight of what she was stepping into. The lunch conversation replayed in her mind, the casual assumptions about Noah's type, the certainty that someone like her wouldn't fit into his world. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was temporary insanity, a brief detour from reality that would end when Noah came to his senses. But as she drove home through Atlanta traffic, one thought persisted above all the doubt and fear. For the first time in her adult life, she was willing to find out what happened next, even if it meant risking everything she thought she knew about herself, even if it meant discovering that some risks were worth taking, no matter how they ended. The used bookstore smelled like old paper and possibility. Rain ran her fingers along the spine of a worn copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God, waiting in the poetry section as Noah had instructed. Tuesday at 7 p.m. had arrived with the weight of anticipation she'd been carrying since Monday's hidden spreadsheet message. I was hoping you'd pick that one. She turned to find Noah approaching from the philosophy aisle, looking impossibly out of place among the dusty shelves in his tailored dark coat. But his eyes held the same nervous energy she felt thrumming under her skin. Zora Neale Hurston, she said, holding up the book. Required reading in college, but I never owned my own copy. Consider it yours. He reached for his wallet, but she shook her head. I can buy my own books, Noah. The use of his first name felt deliberate, a small declaration of independence. He smiled, understanding the message. Of course you can, but let me anyway. I promise it's not about the money. Something in his tone made her relent. They made their way to the counter, where an elderly man with paint-stained fingers rang up their purchase. Noah also bought a collection of Langston Hughes poetry and handed them the books in a brown paper bag. Outside, the October evening was crisp, downtown Atlanta buzzing with after-work energy. Noah gestured toward a small bar tucked between a vintage shop and a sandwich place. Is this place okay? It's quiet, and they have those corner booths where we can actually hear each other. The bar was dimly lit, filled with the kind of people who valued conversation over being seen. They found a booth in the back, surrounded by exposed brick walls covered in local artwork. Noah ordered bourbon neat. Rain chose red wine that came in an actual wine glass, not the plastic cup she was used to at college bars. So, Noah said, settling back in the worn leather seat, how was the rest of your Monday, after our correspondence? Surreal. She took a sip of wine, grateful for the warmth. I felt like I was carrying around a secret that was visible to everyone. But you didn't tell anyone. No, did you? He shook his head. I haven't told anyone about this, us. Whatever this is. He paused, though my assistant did ask why I've been in such a good mood lately. What did you tell her? That the quarterly numbers came in better than expected. His smile was self-deprecating. Which isn't technically a lie. You do handle the quarterly reports. Rain laughed despite herself. Very smooth, Mr. CEO. I'm trying. This is new territory for me. Dating someone from work? Dating someone who matters. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Rain felt her cheeks warm. I've been thinking, she said carefully, about what happens if people find out, about the assumptions they'll make. Noah's expression grew serious. What kind of assumptions? That I'm sleeping my way to job security, that you're having some kind of midlife crisis with the help. She met his eyes. That I'm a gold digger who got lucky. Do you care what they think? It was such a simple question, but it cut straight to the heart of everything she'd been wrestling with. I shouldn't, she said finally. But yes, I care about my reputation. I care about being respected for my work, not whispered about in break rooms. Noah reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. What if I told you that your work speaks for itself? That anyone with half a brain can see you're there because you're good at what you do? But that's not how people's minds work, is it? They see a black woman dating her white CEO boss, and they have opinions. Loud ones. The racial dynamic that had been simmering under the surface was finally named. Noah was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her knuckles. You're right, he said, and I hate that you're right. I hate that my privilege means I don't have to think about those things the way you do. The acknowledgement surprised her. She'd expected defensiveness, or worse, colorblind platitudes about not seeing race. So, what do we do? She asked. We figure it out as we go. Together. He lifted their joined hands, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. But Rain, I need you to know that whatever we decide, whatever happens, it won't affect your job. Not ever. You can't promise that. I can and I am. If this doesn't work out between us, and I really hope it does, but if it doesn't, nothing changes professionally. You have my word. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she wanted to trust that the man sitting across from her, looking at her like she was the most important thing in his field of vision, would keep that promise. There's something else, she said, then hesitated. Tell me. I heard people talking today. About you. About what kind of woman you'd date. She took a breath. Harvard MBA with a trust fund was the general consensus. Noah's jaw tightened. And how did that make you feel? Like maybe they're right. Like maybe I'm fooling myself thinking this could work. Rain. His voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. She met his eyes, those storm cloud blues that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. I've dated the Harvard MBA. I've dated the trust fund princess. I've dated women who looked perfect on paper and left me feeling empty. He leaned forward. You know what I've never dated? Someone who challenges me to be better. Someone who makes me want to earn their respect instead of expecting it. Someone who makes me feel like myself instead of the role I play. Noah, I'm not done. His intensity surprised her. You think I asked you to dinner because you're convenient, because you're there. I asked you because in 2 years of working in the same building, you're the only person who's made me forget I'm supposed to be the guy with all the answers. The confession hit her like a wave, washing away some of the doubt that had been building since Monday's lunch conversation. I'm scared, she whispered. Good. So am I. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. When they left the bar 2 hours later, walking slowly toward the parking garage where their cars waited on different levels, Noah stopped under a streetlight. Can I ask you something? Always. This weekend, would you like to try something completely normal? Movie night at my place? Terrible takeout? Arguing about what to watch? The ordinariness of the suggestion made her smile. That sounds perfect. Good. Because I should warn you, I have very strong opinions about action movies. And I should warn you that I cry at everything, even commercials. I'll stock up on tissues. As they reached the garage entrance, Noah hesitated, then leaned down to press a soft kiss to her forehead. It was chaste, barely more than a whisper of contact, but it sent warmth spreading through her entire body. Sweet dreams, Rain. You too. Driving home, she caught herself smiling at red lights, humming along to songs on the radio she didn't even know. For the first time since this had started, the future felt less like a question mark and more like a door she was finally brave enough to open. But in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered a warning. Secrets had a way of revealing themselves, whether you were ready or not. Noah's apartment was not what she had expected. Rain stood in the doorway of his Buckhead high-rise, taking in the space that somehow felt both expensive and lived in. Yes, There was the expected wall of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline, the sleek kitchen with granite countertops, the furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. But there were also books scattered on the coffee table, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the counter, and a throw blanket that looked soft and well-used, draped over the back of the couch. I was expecting something more sterile, she admitted, setting down her purse and the bottle of wine she'd brought, a mid-range Pinot Grigio that had taken 20 minutes of internal debate at the store. Disappointed? Noah asked, hanging up her jacket with careful attention. The opposite. It feels like you actually live here, he smiled, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she was learning meant he was nervous. I had a decorator when I first moved in. Everything was beige and chrome and looked like a hotel suite. Drove me crazy. I've been slowly making it mine ever since. The making it mine included framed photographs on the bookshelf. Noah with an older couple who had his eyes. Noah and a woman who looked like him, but with longer hair and a mischievous smile. Noah in a cap and gown, next to a man who was clearly his father. Your family? She asked, drawn to the photos. My parents and my sister, Lily. That one's from my MBA graduation. He joined her by the bookshelf. What about you? Any siblings? Only child. My mum raised me mostly on her own. My dad? She paused, not sure how much to share. He wasn't really in the picture after I turned 10. I'm sorry. Don't be. We were better off without him. She touched the frame of the graduation photo. Your parents look proud. They are. Sometimes to an embarrassing degree. My mother still introduces me as my son, the CEO, to people at the grocery store. The image made Rain smile, this powerful man reduced to an embarrassed son by maternal pride. It was humanizing in a way that made her chest warm. So, Noah said, clapping his hands together with exaggerated enthusiasm, the great movie debate. I vote for Die Hard. Classic, quotable, and technically a Christmas movie. It's October. Die Hard transcends seasons. Also, I already ordered Thai food, and action movies go with Thai food. It's science. Rain settled onto his couch, tucking her legs under her. The leather was buttery soft, probably Italian. I counter with When Harry Met Sally. Romantic, quotable, and Billy Crystal is a national treasure. But no explosions. But actual character development. Noah considered this seriously, stroking his chin like he was weighing a major business decision. What if we compromise The Princess Bride? Adventure, romance, quotable dialogue, and at least one explosion. The Princess Bride has explosions. The fire swamp scene is basically an explosion. Lots of flames anyway. You're really stretching the definition of explosion. I'm a creative thinker. It's why they pay me the big bucks. She threw a pillow at him, and he caught it with reflexes that suggested he had siblings who'd trained him well in pillow warfare. The Princess Bride it is, she conceded. But I'm picking the next movie. Deal. The Thai food arrived 20 minutes later, enough containers to feed 4 people, all from the same restaurant where they'd had their first dinner. Noah spread everything out on the coffee table, while Rain found plates in his surprisingly well-stocked kitchen. You remembered my spice tolerance, she said, noting that her pad thai was mild, while his was marked nuclear. I pay attention. They settled in to watch the movie, but Rain found herself more interested in observing Noah than following the plot she could recite from memory. He laughed at all the right parts, made commentary that suggested he'd seen it many times before, and seemed genuinely relaxed in a way she'd never seen him at work. During the sword fight scene, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and set it face down without responding. Work? She asked. My sister, probably wanting to know if I'm still alive since I haven't returned her calls this week. You should answer. I don't mind. I mind. Tonight is about us, not about everything else. The deliberate choice to prioritize their time together sent a flutter through her chest. But as the movie continued, his phone kept buzzing. Each time, Noah's jaw got a little tighter. Finally, during the fire swamp scene, the one with the alleged explosions, Rain paused the movie. Noah, answer your sister. She's obviously worried. He sighed, picking up the phone. Hey, Lily. No, I'm not dead. I'm having dinner with someone. A woman, yes. No, you can't meet her yet. Because it's complicated. Lily. He looked at Rain apologetically. Can I call you tomorrow? I promise I'll explain everything. When he hung up, Rain was studying him with curious eyes. She wants to meet me. She wants to meet anyone I'm willing to admit I'm having dinner with. According to Lily, I haven't dated anyone seriously in over 2 years. Have you? Noah was quiet for a moment, considering the question. No, I haven't. What changed? You. The answer was simple, direct, and hit her like a gentle collision. You changed everything. Before she could respond, he leaned over and kissed her. Not the careful, testing kiss she might have expected, but something deeper, more certain. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone, and for a moment, the rest of the world disappeared. When they broke apart, both breathing a little harder, Rain felt like something fundamental had shifted between them. I should probably tell you, Noah said, his forehead resting against hers, that I'm falling for you, fast and completely, and in a way that should probably scare me more than it does. Should probably? Definitely should. But somehow, with you, being scared feels less important than being honest. Rain thought about all the reasons this was complicated. Work, social expectations, the careful balance she'd built in her life. Then she thought about how right this felt, sitting in his apartment, sharing terrible takeout and debating movie choices like they'd been doing it for years. I'm falling too, she whispered. Good. His smile was soft, relieved. I was hoping I wasn't alone in this. They finished the movie curled together, Rain's head on Noah's shoulder, his fingers playing absently with her hair. During the final scene, she felt tears prick her eyes at Wesley and Buttercup's reunion. You weren't kidding about crying at everything, Noah observed gently. True love makes me emotional, sue me. Never. It's one of my favorite things about you. As the credits rolled, neither of them moved to get up. The Atlanta skyline glittered outside the windows, and Rain felt suspended in a moment that felt too perfect to be real. I should probably go, she said, though she made no move to leave. Probably, Noah agreed, though his arms tightened slightly around her. Early morning tomorrow? And we'll be back to being professional colleagues. The worst part of my week. Finally, reluctantly, she sat up. Noah walked her to the door, helped her into her jacket, and kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that made her knees weak. Sweet dreams, Rain. You too. But as she drove home through the quiet Atlanta streets, Rain couldn't shake the feeling that their perfect bubble was about to burst. Secrets this good, this consuming, had a way of demanding to be shared, and she wasn't sure either of them was ready for what would happen when the world found out. The first sign of trouble was Jasmine's silence. Rain noticed it immediately Monday morning, the way her colleague avoided eye contact, how conversation died when she approached the coffee station, the deliberate distance in interactions that had been easy and natural just days before. But it wasn't until she overheard the whispered conversation by the printer that her blood turned to ice. Saw them together at that bar on Peachtree, her and Beckett, holding hands like, no way. Rain Coleman? Are you sure? Positive. My cousin works at the place next door, said they were all cozy in a corner booth. Rain's hands shook as she pretended to organize papers at her desk, every word hitting like a physical blow. Someone had seen them. Someone had talked. The secret she'd been so carefully guarding was spreading through the office like wildfire. Her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Good morning. Coffee later? She stared at the message, unable to respond. How could she tell him that their carefully constructed privacy had just shattered? By lunch, the whispers had evolved into bold speculation. Rain sat alone in the break room, her sandwich untouched, listening to conversations that felt like knives. I mean, good for her, I guess. Dating the boss is one way to secure your position. Come on, that's not fair. Maybe it's real. Please, you think Noah Beckett is genuinely interested in an admin assistant? It's either a midlife crisis or she's got something on him. Did you see her at the office party last year? Girl cleans up nice, maybe that's all it took. David, from HR, slid into the seat across from her, his expression sympathetic but curious. Rough morning? Just tired, she managed. Look, Rain, I like you. You're good people, but if there's something going on that could affect the workplace dynamic, he let the sentence hang, its implications clear. There's nothing to affect anything, she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded, even as her world crumbled around her. But David's skeptical expression told her he didn't believe her. Worse, it told her that HR was already involved, already asking questions. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of sideways glances and hushed conversations. Rain threw herself into spreadsheets and email responses, anything to avoid the weight of dozens of eyes tracking her every movement. When her computer chimed with a message from Noah, she nearly jumped out of her skin. From nbecketertechflow.com to rcoleman.techflow.com subject, urgent, please see me. Rain, please come to my office at your earliest convenience. Noah. No hidden messages this time. No playful postscripts. Just formal corporate efficiency that made her stomach drop. The walk to the 20th floor felt like a death march. Noah's assistant, Mrs. Patterson, gave her a look that seemed to know everything and judge all of it. "Go right in, dear," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Noah was standing by his window when she entered, his back to the door. Even from behind she could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid set of his spine. "Close the door," he said without turning around. She did, then stood awkwardly in the center of his office, waiting. "They know," he said finally, turning to face her. His expression was carefully controlled, but she could see the storm behind his eyes. "HR got 3 separate reports today about our inappropriate workplace relationship. I heard the whispers this morning. Apparently someone saw us at the bar last week, took photos." He gestured to his computer screen. "They're posted on one of those anonymous office gossip sites. Nothing identifying, but clear enough." Rain's legs suddenly felt unsteady. "Photos? You holding my hand, me kissing your forehead in the parking garage." His voice was flat, professional. "The caption suggests you're sleeping with me for job security." The words hit her like a slap. Everything she'd feared, everything she'd tried to prevent was happening exactly as she'd imagined it would. The humiliation burned in her chest like acid. "What do we do?" she whispered. Noah was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture she recognized from board meetings. "I've been thinking about that all morning, consulting with legal, with HR. And the cleanest solution is to transfer you to another department, eliminate the direct reporting relationship, make it clear that there's no conflict of interest. Transfer me," her voice was hollow, "to marketing, same salary, same benefits. Actually, it might be a step up, more creative work, better advancement opportunities." He was trying to make it sound positive, but all Rain heard was exile, banishment from the job she'd worked so hard to excel at, the department where she'd built relationships and earned respect. "And us?" she asked. Noah's carefully controlled mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the pain underneath. "I don't know. This has gotten complicated very quickly." "Complicated?" She repeated the word like it was foreign. "Is that what I am to you now, a complication?" "That's not what I meant." "No, I think it's exactly what you meant." Anger was rising in her chest, hot and fierce and welcome, because it was better than the crushing humiliation. "The moment this became inconvenient, became a threat to your reputation, I became the problem to be solved. Rain, that's not fair. I'm trying to protect both of us. You're trying to protect yourself. There's a difference." The words hung between them like a chasm. Noah stepped toward her, his hand outstretched, but she backed away. "Don't," she said. "Don't touch me. Not here. Not while you're treating me like a corporate liability. I'm not—" "Yes, you are. You're managing me, Noah, just like your ex-girlfriend said you would. Just like everyone said you would." Her voice broke slightly. "I should have listened." She turned toward the door, needing to escape before she said something she couldn't take back, before she broke down completely in his office. "Rain, wait, please." She paused with her hand on the doorknob, not turning around. "I care about you, more than I've ever cared about anyone, but I also have responsibilities. To 300 employees. I know. You don't have to explain corporate hierarchy to me, Mr. Beckett." The return to his formal title was deliberate. A wall slammed down between them. "When do I start in marketing?" she asked. "Next Monday, if you want to." "I want to think about it." She opened the door and walked out, past Mrs. Patterson's knowing gaze, past the curious stares of the executive assistants, into the elevator that would take her back to her own floor, where everyone now looked at her differently. At her desk, she sat motionless for several minutes, staring at her computer screen without seeing it. Around her, the office hummed with its usual energy, but she felt completely separate from it, like she was watching it all through glass. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kira. "Girl, you need to call me now." Another from her mother. "Honey, someone sent me a link to something online. Is this you?" The humiliation was spreading beyond the office, reaching into every corner of her life. Soon her mother would be fielding questions from church friends. Kira would be dealing with speculation from mutual acquaintances, and Rain would be the girl who thought she could date above her station and got exactly what she deserved. As she packed up her things at the end of the day, Jasmine finally approached her desk. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I think you're brave. Stupid maybe, but brave." "Thanks," Rain said, though she felt anything but brave. "Are you really going to marketing?" "I don't know." "Well, whatever you decide, you're better than what they're saying about you." It was a small kindness, but it nearly broke her. Rain nodded, not trusting her voice, and headed for the parking garage. In her car, finally alone, she let the tears come, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body and left her makeup ruined and her eyes swollen. She cried for the job she loved, for the respect she'd lost, for the man upstairs who'd reduced their entire relationship to a problem requiring corporate solutions. But mostly, she cried for herself, for being naive enough to think that love could conquer the realities of power and privilege and the cruel mathematics of who belonged where in the world. When the tears finally stopped, one thing was crystal clear: she was done being managed. The resignation letter sat on her kitchen table for 3 days, unsigned. Rain had written it Tuesday night in a fury of hurt and wounded pride, the words flowing like poison from a wound. Clean, professional language that betrayed none of the heartbreak behind it. 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately, thanking TechFlow for the opportunities and wishing them continued success. It was perfect. It was final. It was exactly what everyone expected her to do, which was exactly why she couldn't bring herself to sign it. "You've been staring at that paper for 20 minutes, Kira observed from her spot on the couch, where she'd been camping out since Tuesday night, providing tissues, wine, and brutally honest commentary in equal measure. "I know. So either sign it or burn it. This limbo thing is killing me, and I'm not even the one living it." Rain picked up her pen, then set it down again. "What if I'm making the wrong choice? Which choice, staying or leaving?" "Either, both." Rain slumped in her chair, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders like a heavy coat. "What if I stay and transfer to marketing, and everyone always wonders if I earned my position, or if I'm just Noah's, whatever I am to him now? What if you leave and spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been?" It was the question that had been haunting her for 3 sleepless nights. Because underneath all the anger and humiliation, underneath the very real hurt of being treated like a corporate problem to be solved, was something else. The memory of Noah's face when he'd told her he was falling for her. The way he'd looked at her across that Ethiopian restaurant, like she was the most interesting person in the world. Her phone buzzed on the table. Noah's name appeared on the screen, as it had approximately 50 times since Monday's confrontation. She'd ignored every call, every text, every email marked personal please read, but this message was different. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please, before you make any permanent decisions, let me show you something. Just once. Then if you never want to see me again, I'll respect that." Attached was an address she didn't recognize, and a time, Saturday 2 p.m. "Please, Rain." "What's that face?" Kira asked, recognizing the expression that meant Rain was wavering. "He wants to meet." And I should say no, I should sign this letter, find a new job, and move on with my life like this never happened. Should. Kira moved to the kitchen table, sitting across from her. "That's your favorite word, isn't it? Should do this, should do that. What do you want to do?" The answer came faster than she expected. "I want to hear what he has to say. Then go. It's probably just going to be more corporate speak about how this is best for everyone. Maybe. Or maybe it's something else entirely." Kira reached across and squeezed her hand. "You won't know unless you go." Saturday afternoon found Rain driving through a part of Atlanta she rarely visited, following her GPS to an address that turned out to be a small community center in a neighborhood that had clearly seen better days. She sat in her car for several minutes, confused and increasingly convinced this was some kind of mistake. Her phone rang. Noah. "Hello?" She hadn't meant to answer, but curiosity got the better of her. "You came." The relief in his voice was palpable. "I'm here, but I think your GPS is broken. This is a community center." "I know. Come inside. Room 12B. The community center was exactly what she'd expected. Linoleum floors, fluorescent lighting, the smell of coffee and industrial cleaner. Room 12B turned out to be a small conference room where Noah sat at a folding table, looking completely out of place in his weekend clothes among the plastic chairs and motivational posters. But he wasn't alone. "Rain," he stood as she entered. "I'd like you to meet some people." There were 5 of them. 2 women and 3 men, all around her age, all black or Latino, all looking at her with expressions of curiosity and understanding. One of the women stepped forward. "You're Rain. I'm Angela. I work at Morrison & Associates downtown." "I'm confused," Rain said, looking between Noah and the group. "We all are, or were, in similar situations," said one of the men, introducing himself as Marcus. "Interracial relationships with significant power dynamics. Angela's married to a senior partner at her firm. I'm dating a woman who owns the company where I work." Noah reached out through some mutual connections, Angela explained. "Asked if we'd be willing to share our experiences, talk about how we made it work." Rain felt something crack open in her chest. You reached out to strangers? I reached out to people who might understand what we're going through better than I do, Noah said quietly. Because you were right, Rain. I was treating you like a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved, and I needed to understand how wrong that was. For the next hour, she listened to stories that felt like mirrors of her own experience. Angela talked about the whispers, the assumptions, the way people questioned her competence once her relationship became known. Marcus shared his struggle with feeling like he had to prove himself twice as hard to earn respect. Another woman, Carmen, described the loneliness of feeling like she didn't belong in either world, not successful enough for her partner's circle, too fancy for her old friends. But they also talked about the other side, how Carmen's partner had quit his company to start their own business together, how Angela had eventually been made partner herself, her work speaking louder than the gossip, how Marcus had learned to set boundaries, demanding respect while refusing to hide who he loved. The thing is, Angela said toward the end, it doesn't get easier. People don't stop talking, but you get stronger. You learn who your real allies are. And if the person you're with is worth it, if they're willing to fight for you the way you fight for them, then the rest becomes background noise. When the meeting ended and the group began to disperse, Noah walked Rain to her car in silence. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Why? She asked finally. Because I love you. The words were simple, direct, without the corporate polish she was used to from him. Because I realized that protecting you from gossip isn't the same as protecting what we have. Because I've been thinking like a CEO instead of like a man who's found the person he wants to spend his life with. Noah, I'm not done. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. I talked to the board this week about us, about the fact that I'm in love with someone who works for the company and how we're going to handle it professionally. Rain's breath caught. You told the board? I told them that you're the most competent person in that building, that any company would be lucky to have you, and that if they have a problem with me dating you, they can find a new CEO. The words hit her like a physical force. You didn't. I did, because hiding what we have, treating it like something shameful, was the real mistake, not falling for you in the first place. Tears she hadn't expected began to blur her vision. What did they say? They said as long as there's no direct reporting relationship and no conflicts of interest, my personal life is my own business. His smile was soft, hopeful. They also said they'd hate to lose either of us over something as human as falling in love. Rain leaned against her car, overwhelmed. The transfer to marketing, still an option if you want it, but not required. We can make the current situation work if that's what you prefer. HR has already drafted new protocols. And the gossip? The photos? The people who think I'm just another gold digger? Noah stepped closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his storm cloud eyes. Let them think what they want. I know who you are. You know who you are. And anyone whose opinion actually matters will figure it out eventually. It won't be easy. No, it won't. But Rain, he reached up to touch her face, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I'd rather do difficult with you than easy with anyone else. The parking lot stretched around them, quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. Rain thought about the resignation letter still sitting on her kitchen table, about all the reasons this was complicated and risky and potentially devastating. Then she thought about the way Noah had looked in that community center, surrounded by strangers he'd sought out just to understand her experience better, about the courage it had taken to tell his board about them, about the word he'd used, love. I haven't signed the resignation letter yet, she said finally. Good, don't. I might take the marketing position anyway. New challenges, room to grow, whatever you want. And we do this the right way. Transparent, professional, no more secret spreadsheet messages. Agreed. And Noah, she looked up at him, this man who'd turned her carefully ordered world upside down in the best possible way. I love you too. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't hidden in a corner booth or a parking garage. It was right there in broad daylight, with nothing to hide and everything to hope for. It was the beginning of something real. 3 months later, Rain Coleman walked into the TechFlow holiday party with her head held high and Noah Beckett's hand in hers. The Marriott ballroom buzzed with conversation, the sound of 300 employees celebrating the end of a successful year. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables, decorated with winter greenery, and a jazz quartet played softly in the corner. Noah's suggestion, she knew, remembering his love for the genre. But tonight wasn't about the music or the decorations or even the celebration itself. Tonight was about the moment they'd both been building toward since that community center parking lot 3 months ago, the first time they would appear together, publicly, as a couple. "Are you ready for this?" Noah asked quietly, his thumb tracing reassuring circles on her knuckles. Rain looked around the room, taking in the faces that had become familiar over her 2.5 years at TechFlow. Some looked curious, others surprised, a few openly judgmental. But there were also smiles, genuine ones from colleagues who'd gotten to know her work in marketing, from Jasmine, who'd become a real friend, from David in HR, who'd helped navigate the transition with unprecedented grace. "Ready," she said, and meant it. They made their way through the room slowly, Noah stopping to chat with department heads while Rain greeted her new marketing teammates. The conversations were natural, comfortable, but she could feel the undercurrent of awareness, the way news of their relationship had spread through the company like ripples in a pond. At the bar, they ran into Jasmine and her husband, a soft-spoken man who taught high school history. "Rain," Jasmine's smile was warm, genuine. "You look incredible. That dress is stunning." It was, a deep emerald green that complemented her skin tone perfectly, chosen after 3 shopping trips with Kira, who'd insisted she needed a dress that says "I belong anywhere I choose to be." "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." As they chatted, Rain noticed Jasmine's husband studying Noah with the careful assessment of someone protective of his wife's friend. "So you're the famous CEO," he said finally, extending his hand. "I'm Tony. I've heard a lot about you." "All good, I hope," Noah replied, accepting the handshake with steady eye contact. "Jury's still out," Tony said with a slight smile that took some of the edge off the words. "But Jasmine says you make her happy, and that's what matters." It was a small moment, but it meant everything. Acceptance not because of Noah's position or their relationship's corporate implications, but because of what they brought to each other's lives. Dinner was announced, and they found their assigned table, a mix of marketing staff, IT specialists, and senior management. As the evening progressed, Rain found herself relaxing into conversations that had nothing to do with their relationship and everything to do with work projects, industry trends, and shared experiences. "I have to say," said Miranda from the creative team, leaning across the table, "the campaign you developed for the Southeast expansion was brilliant. The demographic targeting alone increased our response rate by 40%. The compliment sent warmth through Rain's chest. In the 3 months since transferring to marketing, she'd thrown herself into the work with renewed energy, finally finding a role that utilized both her analytical skills and her creativity. The whispers about how she'd gotten the position had faded as her results spoke for themselves. "It was a team effort," she replied, but Noah caught her eye and smiled proudly. After dinner, as awards were presented and speeches given, Noah was called to the stage to address the company. Rain watched him command the room with the same natural authority she'd always admired, talking about the year's achievements, thanking departments by name, painting a vision for the future that made people lean forward in their seats. But when he reached the personal acknowledgements, her breath caught. "Before I close," Noah said, his eyes finding hers across the crowded room, "I want to talk about something that's been on my mind a lot this year, the courage it takes to be authentic in spaces that don't always welcome authenticity." The room grew quieter, more attentive. "Over the past few months, I've watched someone navigate challenges with grace, dignity, and strength that continually amazes me. Someone who refused to compromise her values or her identity, even when it would have been easier to do so." Rain felt tears prick her eyes, understanding where this was going. "Excellence speaks for itself," Noah continued, "and so does character. And while I could talk about quarterly numbers and market expansion, what I'm most proud of this year is that our company culture has grown to embrace both professional success and personal authenticity." He paused, his gaze still locked on hers. "Sometimes the most important changes happen not in boardrooms or strategic planning sessions, but in moments when individuals choose to be brave enough to live their truth. Thank you to everyone who's chosen courage this year. You've made us all better." The applause that followed felt different from the polite corporate clapping that had greeted earlier speakers. It felt personal, meaningful, like recognition of something deeper than business achievements. As Noah returned to their table, Rain felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Mrs. Patterson, Noah's assistant, standing behind her chair. "That was about you, wasn't it?" the older woman said quietly. Yes, I think so." Mrs. Patterson smiled, her usually formal expression softening. "Good. He's been different since you came into his life. Happier, more human. She squeezed Rain's shoulder gently. And you've been glowing since you moved to marketing. Sometimes change is exactly what we need, even when it's scary. The evening wound down with dancing. The jazz quartet joined by a DJ who coaxed couples onto the floor. Noah extended his hand to Rain with a questioning look. One dance. I should probably warn you that I'm not very good at this. Neither am I. We'll figure it out together. On the dance floor, surrounded by their colleagues and the soft glow of party lights, they swayed to a slow song that seemed to exist just for them. Rain could feel eyes on them, some curious, some approving, some still reserving judgment. But for the first time, the weight of those gazes felt manageable. No regrets? Noah asked softly, his hand warm against the small of her back. About what? The transfer, the gossip, the 3 months of figuring out how to date your technically not boss while half the company watched. Any of it? All of it? Rain considered the question seriously, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The fear, the uncertainty, the nights spent questioning every decision, but also the growth, the self-discovery, the love that had become the strongest thing in her life. No regrets, she said finally. You? Only that it took me so long to be brave enough to ask you to dinner. As the song ended and they remained in each other's arms, Rain looked around the ballroom one more time. Tomorrow they would return to their respective floors, their professional roles, the careful balance they'd learned to maintain between personal and corporate life. There would still be challenges, still be people who questioned their relationship, still be moments when the complexity of their situation felt overwhelming. But tonight, they were simply Noah and Rain, two people who'd found each other against all odds and chosen to build something real despite the obstacles. Tonight, love had won. Ready to go home? Noah asked, his voice soft against her ear. With you? Always. And as they walked out of the Marriott together, hand in hand, Rain realized that home wasn't a place anymore. It was the man beside her, and the future they were brave enough to build together. Would you have the courage to love someone like this? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. 2 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of their shared apartment in Virginia Highland, casting golden light across the kitchen table where Rain sat with her laptop and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She was deep in quarterly projections for her latest campaign when Noah emerged from the bedroom, hair still damp from his shower, straightening his tie with the careful precision she'd come to love. 2 years of living together, and she still felt that small flutter in her chest when she saw him in the morning, rumpled and human and hers. "You're working already," he observed, dropping a kiss on the top of her head as he passed. "The Morrison account presentation is this afternoon. I want to make sure the numbers are perfect." They always are. It was true. In the 18 months since she'd been promoted to senior marketing manager, Rain had built a reputation that had nothing to do with who she was dating and everything to do with her ability to turn data into compelling stories that drove results. The whispers had faded, replaced by respect earned through late nights, innovative campaigns, and success that spoke louder than any gossip ever could. Noah poured himself coffee from the pot she'd made earlier, adding the exact amount of cream she knew he preferred. These small intimacies of shared life, knowing how someone took their coffee, the way they liked their eggs, which side of the bed they preferred, had become the foundation of a love deeper than either of them had imagined possible. "Lily called last night," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "She wants to know if we're still coming to dinner Sunday." "Of course we are. I promised I'd bring my famous mac and cheese." "Famous according to who?" "According to your mother, who specifically requested it after I made it for Easter." Noah smiled, remembering. His family's acceptance hadn't been immediate. There had been awkward dinners, carefully polite conversations, the subtle ways privilege tried to assert itself, but Rain's warmth, intelligence, and refusal to be diminished had won them over. Now his mother called her directly to plan family gatherings, and Lily had become one of her closest friends. "Speaking of my family," Noah said, his tone carefully casual, "I should probably mention that I talked to my father yesterday." "About?" "About asking for my grandmother's ring." Rain's fingers stilled on her laptop keyboard. She looked up to find Noah watching her with an expression that was nervous and hopeful and absolutely certain all at once. "Your grandmother's ring," she repeated. "The one my grandfather gave her when he proposed in 1952. The one she wore for 63 years until she passed." Noah reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "The one I'd like to give to the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." The kitchen fell silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Atlanta traffic beginning its morning rush. Rain felt her heart doing something complicated in her chest, a rhythm that was part fear, part joy, part overwhelming love. "Noah, I know it's terrifying," he said quickly. "I know there will still be people who have opinions, who think they know our story better than we do. I know that being married to me means signing up for a lifetime of being the CEO's wife in some people's eyes, no matter what you accomplish on your own. And I know that you're the strongest, most brilliant woman I've ever met. I know that you make me want to be better than I am. I know that every day with you feels like a gift I'm not sure I deserve." His voice grew softer. "And I know that I can't imagine a future that doesn't have you in it." Rain closed her laptop slowly, her mind racing. 2 years ago, she would have been paralyzed by the implications, the weight of what saying yes would mean. Now looking at this man who'd learned to see the world through her eyes, who'd fought for them when it would have been easier to let go, who'd built a life with her based on mutual respect and shared dreams, the answer felt inevitable. "Is this your way of asking me to marry you?" she said finally. "This is my way of asking if you'd be open to the idea of me asking you to marry you, properly, with a ring and a plan and probably a speech I'll rehearse 17 times. She laughed, the sound bright and clear in the morning light. "You want to rehearse a proposal? I want it to be perfect. You deserve perfect. Noah." She stood and moved around the table, settling onto his lap, her arms looping around his neck. "I don't need perfect, I need real, I need honest, I need you exactly as you are, asking me exactly as you want to ask." He buried his face in her neck, breathing her in. "What if you say no? What if I say yes? Then I spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already deserve me," she whispered, "just like I deserve you, just like we deserve this happiness we've built together." When he pulled back to look at her, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Rain Coleman," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion, "will you marry me?" The question hung between them, simple and profound and life-changing. Outside their window, Atlanta was waking up, people hurrying to work, starting their days, living their ordinary, beautiful lives. But here, in their kitchen with the morning sun painting everything golden, time felt suspended. "Yes," she said, and the word felt like coming home. "Yes, I'll marry you." When he kissed her, it tasted like coffee and possibility and the future they'd been brave enough to choose. That tasted like love that had survived gossip and doubt and the complicated mathematics of who was supposed to belong with whom. Later, she would call Kira, who would scream with joy and immediately start planning an engagement party. She would call her mother, who would cry happy tears and ask about wedding dates. She would field congratulations from colleagues, family, friends who'd watched their love story unfold with varying degrees of skepticism and support. But for now, in the quiet of their shared morning, she simply held the man she loved and marveled at how far they'd traveled from that first terrifying Friday afternoon when everything had changed. Some stories, she realized, don't end with the credits rolling or the book closing. Some stories keep unfolding day by day, choice by choice, in the ordinary moments that add up to extraordinary lives. This was one of those stories, and she couldn't wait to see what happened next. 3 years later, Rain Beckett would walk across the stage to accept the Marketing Professional of the Year award from the Atlanta Business Journal. In the audience, her husband would cheer loudly enough to embarrass her, and she would catch his eye and smile, remembering the woman who once worried about being seen as just someone's girlfriend. That woman had learned something valuable. Love doesn't diminish you when it's real. It makes you more yourself than you ever thought possible. And sometimes the greatest risk you can take is believing you deserve to be loved exactly as you are. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.